Hey guys, I'm Sam, that's the Sun Eater, and this is a YouTube channel where we look at how to use auxiliary batteries and solar to make an old EV last longer and other ways to add utility using solar. Today we're going to talk about how adding solar onto a battery electric vehicle can actually make the battery last longer. Not just give the vehicle more range, but make the battery inside the vehicle last longer. But before we can do that, we need to talk about what it's like to drive an old Leaf during the wintertime. Today it's about 73 degrees outside because this is Texas, and even in January you get days like this. But there's been plenty of mornings where I walk outside and the car looks like this. As you can see, it's got a good coat of frost on it. All batteries lose capacity when they get cold, and since battery capacity is essentially the range of an electric vehicle, all electric vehicles lose range when they get cold. Now, if you have a 2019 Leaf or a Chevy Bolt or pretty much every Tesla, you can afford to lose 50 or 60 miles in the range when it's really cold outside and still have well over 100 miles left for daily driving, so it's not really a problem. But if we've got a 2011 through 2015 Nissan Leaf, when they only had the 24 kilowatt hour batteries, you might have a maximum highway range of only about 35 miles left if it's below freezing outside. So, if you're looking to recreate this experiment that we're doing here, where you buy an old EV, you get it for real cheap because it's got some battery degradation, doesn't have a whole lot of range, and you're going to add some solar and some batteries to give it that extra range that you need to make it work for you, you may have to account on there being a month or even 2 months a year where you're back to driving your old ICE car, the F-150 in my case. And at this point, you might ask yourself, well, hey, then I'm paying to basically have a car sitting there. Insurance, registration, stuff like that adds up. Is it even really, can we even save money doing this if we have to park it for a month a year or 2 months a year? So let's look at some math, and I'm just going to do this hypothetical based on the numbers that I have here in the States for simplicity's sake. You can look up the figures and do the own math in your country if you live somewhere other than the U.S. So we know, according to the DOT, that the average American driver drives about 13,500 miles a year. If you divide the total miles driven on average by year by the average mileage, you get the average fuel use per year in the U.S., and you can multiply that by the average price paid for a gallon of gas, which is $2.60. This number comes out to, on average, about $1,500, $1,600 a year, somewhere around there, that the average American pays for gasoline. So that $1,600, $1,500, $1,600 figure, even if we multiply that by only 10 out of 12 of the months of the year, we still get a figure of about $1,300. That's what we use in those, how much money we spend on gas in the 10 months of the year when this car could easily be driven instead because temperatures are above freezing in the morning. So even if we take, let's say, our whole car insurance payment of $250 and the registration of $50 out of that $1,200 that we're spending on gas in that time period that we could be driving this, there's still $800 or $900 left a year that we're spending on gas that we don't really have to be if we can be driving electric. So even if you have to park it for 2 months a year, there's still a pretty large window there for us to save money just because we're spending so much on gas. And bear in mind that $1,200, $1,300 figure, that's the average. That means there's a good chance for you, there's a 50% chance for you, it's higher than that. My Ford gets about 14 miles to the gallon, so I can double almost that $1,200 figure to get the number I'm spending on gas the 10 months of the year when I could be driving, the 10 months a year when it's below freezing consistently in the morning, and I can drive this thing pretty much every day. So even if we have to park this thing for a month or 2 months a year, there's still plenty of opportunity for us to save money driving it the other 10 months of the year. Okay, so that's enough about that. Now let's talk about how we can use solar to actually make the batteries inside the vehicle last longer. This section is going to be pretty math intensive. I'm going to look at a very specific case first of just this car and the backup batteries in the back of it. And then I'm going to look at a much simpler, less math intensive general way that solar can be used to make the EVs last longer. After that, so if you want a general conceptual look at how solar can be used to make EV batteries last longer, skip to this time in the video, and that'll cut you right there. So now let's cut to the notebook, and we're going to take a real close look at how power flows in and out of the battery bank that I have in the back of this vehicle, because we've got to understand that before we can understand what role solar is going to play in reducing the number of cycles that we put on our main EV battery. Okay, so I've drawn up a little chart here of how the charge is going to be flowing in and out of our auxiliary battery bank from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and right above that I've put our solar power input. It's only about 50 watts from 7 to 8 a.m. and from 6 to 7 p.m. peaking for between 11 and 3 at about 450 watts. Hey, I've got to interrupt myself here for a moment. I'm putting up a graph of what my home solar output looks like, just in case you've never seen the bell curve for power output from a solar panel array before. You can look at this and see how pretty much power output starts at 7 a.m. ish, and by around 7 p.m. it's 0. And for the 2 hours around those, sunrise and sunset, you're not really getting any power at all out of your array. So you can look at that graph right there and then kind of see that represented by the numbers in the notebook that I'm writing down. It's not quite there yet. The system I have on it today, it's pretty close. I'm sure we can get it up to 450 once we get these last few areas flushed out with solar here and here. So that's what our power into the system is going to look like. Now I'm going to do right here beneath this bar another line of what our power outflow from the car charger, the power flowing out of the auxiliary bank in the back through the charging cable into the vehicle, is going to look like underneath this bar here. Okay, so I've gone in and put little blue X's in the times of the day when the car charger is running. They add up to about 4 hours, which is about the total charge time that I can run this thing in July when I've got peak sunlight. That's going to turn into about 4 hours of charging, turns into about it's 25 miles of range. But underneath here, the net discharge of the backup battery bank is our solar input minus what our vehicle charger is pulling out of those batteries. So during this hour it's negative 1350, during that half hour there it's negative 600, etc., etc. You can see how during the middle of the day, when we've got our peak solar input, our net discharge of the batteries is a lot smaller. And that's going to be the critical factor, kind of, that difference from negative 600 to negative 475 is going to explain why our main vehicle battery cycles less when we put solar on it. So this is our net discharge. I'm going to go back through and drop our net charge to fill in the rest of these little blanks here, and that'll give us a line of basically whether the battery is charging or discharging all through the day in here, and we can add it up and look at the net amount that we pulled out of our batteries. Okay, so when we go back through and we add in how much power our solar panels added to the system in these little increments of time when the charger wasn't on, we can add all of these numbers together and get the net flow of power out of the battery bank at 2.5 kilowatt hours. That's the net flow out, which is good. If this battery bank starts the day at 4.8 kilowatt hours, it's well, pulling 2.5 out of it keeps it well within that healthy range of discharge. You don't really want to discharge your batteries more than 80%. So that's a great number for us to hit. That's why I use this timing schedule. But, and here's the important part, batteries are damaged on both the charge and discharge cycles. When I say damage, I mean it's just the normal wear and tear on a battery. When you look at a battery, when you look at buying a battery, the manufacturer always lists its lifespan in cycles. I'll see if I can put up a few pictures of places where people sell batteries, and you can see that it's listed in terms of cycle life. And that cycle happens both on the discharge and charge section of that battery. So to look at how much wear and tear you really put on a battery in this circumstance, you have to add up all of these numbers, because power flowing in and out of those batteries puts wear on them. And the cumulative power flow in and out of the battery would be 6150 watts, which at a 60% state of 60% state of discharge, being one full cycle for those AGM batteries that I've got in the back of this thing, that would be 2.16 cycles. Okay, I know that's a lot to unpack, that's a lot of math, but basically what the takeaway that you need to know from this is that by using a 1400 watt, just your standard normal charger that comes with the car, that level 1 EVSE, and a solar battery bank, you're going to be putting 2.16 cycles. Now, so that's what this charge and discharge chart looks like with your standard 1.4 kilowatt hour charger. What if we could find a charger that instead of charging at 12 amps, which is what this charges at, charged at only 7 or 8 amps, and we used that in this same kind of time, at the same time, roughly same times of the day. If we used a 8 amp charger instead, would that change our battery cycle rate? Well, I went online to evseadapters.com. I'll put a link in the video description, and I found a pretty cool little variable rate charger that will actually let you charge at 3 different amperages, 8, the standard 12, and 16. And as you can see, it's got a built-in kilowatt meter up there at the top right hand corner, which is pretty handy. I've heard of people who there's 2 people in the household, and they split the electric bill. They're like roommates, and whenever the power bill comes due, if one of them drives an EV and the other one doesn't, there's always a little bit of dispute over how much power was used. So this little clock up here will stop when you unplug the car, and this little EVSE will actually give you, it'll keep track, as long as you don't unplug it from the wall, from the power source, of how many hours you charge, how many kilowatt hours were used. So that would be one way that you could settle any disputes about how much power your roommate was using to charge their electric vehicle. But anyways, so this, you can see on the right hand there, it's charging at 7.5 amps. Even though I have it set to the 8 amp setting, it's charging at 7.5, which gives us a charging power. The amount of power that reduced amperage is pulling out of these batteries is only about 900 watts. So what would that flow chart that we just did look like if we reduce the charge rate from 1400 watts down to 900? Let's take a look at that. Man, the crows are having a field day today. Okay, so this is our same charge-discharge schedule that I did for the 1400 watt charger, but using that new custom 7.5 amp, which comes out to 900 watt charger. And instead of 4 hours of charging, I've extended it to 6.5 hours. Because it charges at a slower rate, that gives us a apples to apples comparison as far as overall power going into the vehicle. And underneath the time chart there, you've got the net power flow in and out of the battery, And when you add those all up, you get the cumulative power flow in and out of the batteries is 5,600 watts or 1.94 cycles versus 6,150 or 2.16 cycles. So you divide those two and you actually get a 10% reduction in battery cycling when you use a slower car charger. That would yield a 10% increase in the battery life, which is essentially a 10% increase in the vehicle life. And that's not nothing. If the batteries in the back, the battery bank back there is going to be the limiting factor on this portable EV charging station's lifespan, which it probably will, a 10% increase in longevity means that I'll be getting about 2.5 more months of life out of the system over, you know, I'm ballparking it'll last about 2 years. So we add, 2.5 months onto that, and I spend about $200 a month on gas when I'm driving the Ford. So that 10% increase in battery longevity will save me $500 over 2.5 years, or 2 years, which is easily enough to pay for that car charger and some over, to pay for that car charger twice over. So why is that cycle rate so much lower when you charge at a lower amperage? Well, the answer is that because the car charger pulls so much more wattage out of those batteries than the solar can add, you're kind of forcing power in and out of those batteries as you cycle that car charger on and off. Theoretically, if you could get a car charger that would exactly match the input of your solar system and additionally, you know, pull out the extra 2.5 kilowatts, 3 kilowatts out of your battery bank that you want over the day, you could theoretically get this number down to probably one cycle rate and get yourself a 50% increase in battery longevity if you could match the charger, match your car charger to pull out just as much power as your solar is putting in, minus the 2.53 kilowatts you want to pull out of your backup batteries. Now, why can we not do that? Because there is hardware underneath the hood of this Leaf. In between where this car charger plugs in and the main battery, there's hardware that changes the little 120 volts we've got going through here into the probably 400 volt power that's necessary to charge the main car battery. And that transformer that's in there is just, it's designed to work within a certain range of amperages. And we can manipulate that to a certain extent using these variable rate chargers, but I don't think you can take that below 7 amps and still have this car recognize the charge and still get that little charging light to blink on the dash there. So while there are some limitations by what we can achieve using variable rate chargers, there's plenty of room for significantly reducing the cycling we're doing to our batteries by trying to get our charging amperage to match our solar input. Okay, so that's great. We can reduce the cycle rate on the battery bank in our little do-it-yourself hobby car. But can we use solar to reduce the cycling of batteries on straight from the manufacturer cars like the Lightyear 1, Sono Motors solar car, the Cybertruck with the solar option? Can we use solar in those vehicles to reduce cycling on the battery directly as they come from the manufacturer? Yes, and here's how. So I don't have time today to put the car up on blocks and pop the undercarriage off and show you guys exactly where the battery connection is, but I'm going to pull some Leaf X-ray photos off the internet so you can see kind of where that battery connection is underneath the vehicle, and see how the battery to motor connection is, because that's where we're going to run the solar power to. This is a cutaway image of the Nissan Leaf. I found it on Green Tech Media's website, and I'll put a link in the video description. And you can see the connection from the main battery to the motor right here. Ultimately, when we connect the solar directly to the main battery on my Solar Leaf, this will be the connection point. The voltage of a fully charged Leaf battery is around 380 volts. So I'll have to find a way to increase my solar power from 18 volts, which is what I get from the panels right now, up to around 380 or 390. It won't be easy, but I think it's doable. To charge a battery, you have to apply a higher voltage to that battery than the battery currently has. So whether it's a Lightyear 1 or a Sono Motors car or a Solar Cybertruck, the voltage being applied by the solar on the vehicle at the battery connection has to be higher than the battery voltage. And that winds up having a very important consequence when you're driving the car. Because the voltage acts like, I guess, kind of electric pressure when you close the circuit, i.e. push down on the go pedal, the car's motor will draw power preferentially from the highest voltage source, which is, of course, in the solar car, is going to be the photovoltaics. That's because the PV input has to be higher voltage than the battery in order to charge the battery. Now, of course, your car can't get all the power it needs from the solar, so the motors, the motors in these electric vehicles can easily use 40 or 50 kilowatts, but the first 6 or 7 or 800 watts are going to come from the solar because it's being put in at a higher voltage, which means the rate at which your main vehicle's battery is being cycled is reduced by the entire output of the photovoltaic system when you're driving in the sun. At a time when all these companies are spending tens of millions of dollars to get any kind of edge they can, and the battery performance, battery lifespan, the number of cycles they can get out of a battery, this 3 or 4 or 5% increase that you can get in a battery's lifespan by putting solar on the outside of the vehicle is not insignificant. Anytime you're sitting at like a red light or a drive-through, anywhere where you're using not a whole lot of power, 500-600 watts, just enough to run the radio, maybe the fans, the headlights, that kind of stuff. Anytime where your power usage is less than the 6 or 7 or 800 watts you can get from the vehicle solar, your battery is actually not cycling at all. It's getting all the power it needs from the solar on the vehicle, and that over time can add up to be a significant increase in the lifespan of the main battery pack, and thus the lifespan of the vehicle overall. Okay, so by adding solar to the vehicle, we can charge it while it's parked. We can get a portable solar generator that comes with us wherever the vehicle goes. And we can extend the life of the main drive battery by 3 to 5%, which, when you figure that most of these batteries now cost $10,000, $15,000 to build, becomes significant over time. Alright, that's all I got for today. Thank you for sticking with me. I know it was a math and theory heavy episode. Appreciate you guys supporting the channel, and I'll catch you next time. Hey, I almost forgot about my Economy V of the Week section. The first one comes to you from California, LA. It's basically the same car that I have. It's a 2012 Leaf. It's still got 7 battery bars left, so pretty much the exact same car, same range, same capabilities as the one I have. It's aged better in California because the climate's a lot more moderate there. And they're selling it for $49.50. I imagine you can haggle them down at least $600 or $700 on that, and get yourself a perfectly functioning 50-mile-a-day commuter for probably about $4,300. Next, we're popping over to the East Coast, over in Maryland. Found this one on Facebook Marketplace as well. It's actually an even better deal. It's got 2012 Leaf Silver with 9 of the battery bars left, so probably 60-65 miles maximum range, for $5,900. once again, when you're buying a used car, always haggle and haggle hard. That's where you're going to save yourself the most money at and snag yourself a great commuter car for around $5 grand. Alright, this is the real ending this time. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and I'll catch you next time.